morning, everyone. It's so amazing to see everyone. Let's try this again. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Welcome to the Action Forum. It's so good to see you all here today. To begin, I just wanted to give a few really heartfelt thanks to the people and organizations that make this possible. The Resnick Family Foundation, in particular, Linda and Stuart, the John P. and Ann Welsh McNulty Foundation, Common Era, the Mohammed bin Zayed University of Artificial Intelligence is with us here today, Margot and Tom Pritzker, the Maskirtard Center for Inclusive Growth, Jillian and Robert Steele, and the California Endowment. Thank you all so much. This is also our biggest Action Forum yet. We have representation from every single one of our fellowships. So thank you all so much for coming from across the world to make it here to Aspen. We also have our most China Fellows here ever. After relaunching this very vital China Fellowship after 6 years of dormancy from the hard work of Shane Chadrati, Brian Wong, and Spring Fu. So just huge congrats and welcome. This is also my first real week back from maternity leave, so you'll see my 3-month around. Coming kind of out of the, let's call it wilderness of postpartum, I was on a walk last week trying to think about, how to start this week and what to say to you all today. And the word that kept coming up for me was imagination. I live near Echo Park in Los Angeles, and so as I was trying to think about what is on the minds of leaders today, what can send us off into this week, this park is usually bustling with street vendors, with nannies pushing strollers, with people speaking every type of language, and on this particular day, it was quiet, and it was empty. I opened up the news on my phone. Don't recommend that. That did not help. But I was sitting with this feeling that, okay, this is the world I'm coming back into from maternity leave. This is the world that I'm raising my 2 sons in. And I felt, to be totally honest, that pull of this retreat back to safety, or to focus just on my family, to tend my own garden. And I know, and I've spoken to many of you, have that similar feeling. That the sense of, despite our best efforts, the systems are too broken, the forces too big, the future too grim. And we have a very sophisticated analysis of what is wrong. Any news outlet that I can tell is ready to tell you that this is the end of times. Buckle up, get a passport, because things are going to be hard. 75 years ago, there was another kind of sense of an end and a beginning. We, of course, this week are celebrating our 75th anniversary of the Aspen Institute. And I've spent some time with our founding ideas and really find some beauty and some power in them, largely thanks to the work and the research of Todd Bregfoyle. So I wanted to share a few insights from our founding that could help ground our week together. The first is that our founders believed in the power of dialogue, not just conversation, but genuine dialogue across difference, as both a means to things like peace, and an end in and of itself. This meant learning to sit with people whose ideas challenged your own, but it also meant being in dialogue with the past, wrestling with the questions that the previous generations have left us, so we could better understand where we come from and differentiate ourselves thoughtfully. To quote Todd in one of his recent lectures, they believed that each generation's task is to assess what we have inherited so we can think creatively and critically about the future. They also understood at this time, 75 years ago, that human dignity was under siege. In a world where totalitarian systems were reducing people to mere functions of the state, they insisted that leaders must protect what makes us fundamentally human, our capacity to think freely, to choose, to flourish as whole beings. And perhaps most critically, they sought to cultivate an intellectual resiliency. They knew ideas were powerful, At the height of McCarthyism, for example, Aspen seminarians were reading Marx. They believed we needed to develop leaders who were intellectually fearless, who wouldn't just retreat into their own ideology when confronted with something new or something challenging, but who could learn and grapple so that you can sharpen your own sword, clarify your own convictions. And they believed in the quiet of these mountains. There was a lot of pressure in our founding to do something that was easier and more accessible in the city, and that there's something special about the quiet of these mountains to do this vital work. Finally, the founders believed in the integration of mind and body and spirit, that ideas alone weren't enough. Leaders needed that deeper vitality in order to lead with courage, the courage the world needed. In the words of Jose Ortega y Gasset, who guided the founding vision of the Institute in many ways, we needed leaders that, quote, could allow their inner self to live intensely and give themselves fully to thinking, imagining, loving, and feeling. Notice that word, imagining. Not just thinking, not just analyzing, but imagining. The founding luminaries of the Institute were not naive. They were not bypassing the crises of their age. Their lives were already marred by it. But they understood something that perhaps we have forgotten, that our job as leaders is to imagine what might come next. Goethe, Aspen's very first summit in 1949 was held to celebrate the bicentennial of his birth. In the mind of our founders, Goethe represented the kind of integrated thinking and living that leaders need. He was, of course, a literary powerhouse, but also a very serious scientist. And as a scientist, and I find this so interesting, Goethe was obsessed with the idea of understanding how life unfolds. He coined the term morphology, literally the study of form, and spent decades studying how plants and animals become. Unlike other scientists of the time who wanted to break down nature into component parts, Goethe was interested in wholeness, in process, in what he called the phenomena of becoming. He developed something called exact sensorial imagination. This wasn't dissociation, this was discipline. It was the practice of perceiving not just what is, but what's trying to become. The discipline to imagine what is trying to become. I want to share a story with you about leaders who deeply understand and embody imagination as a leadership imperative, who knows what it takes to take the world as it is and make it into something better. This is a story we'll get to know really well this week. We'll do the global premiere of a documentary on Thursday night. It's the story of Watts, California. It's a 2 square mile neighborhood in my own hometown of Los Angeles. In that 2 square miles, there is an average of 100 homicides per year. It is one of the most violent neighborhoods in the country and holds the lowest life expectancy in the county. Until, of course, the story we're about to tell. After a police ride-along, 6 fellows across 3 fellowships invited 200 community members to record their life on iPhones. Of those 200, 20 people said yes, and 16 are here with us in this room and here with us this week. So I'd actually I want to give you a proper Aspen welcome. I'm going to call your name, and if you feel moved to stand, I'd welcome. Please hold your applause to the end, but do want to give you proper applause. LaWanda Hawkins, Cornelius Willis, Nisi McKinney, Emily Avalos, Pastor Jose Hernandez, Iris Romero, Sean Reynolds, Tim Pierce, Christina Rapati, Marilyn Gonzalez, Tyrone Riley Sr., Tyrone Riley Jr., Eric Loomis, Kiana Williams, Celeste Garnica, and Jaime Gregory. Please welcome. Over 3 years, they recorded their lives, and they shared what they recorded with one another. using the Aspen method of dialogue. They brokered something different. They understood how to see their life in each other's shoes, from each other's eyes, and what amounted was a peace treaty that reduced homicides by 90%. But I want to zoom into one moment, the moment of choosing to sit down at that table to begin with. This wasn't just an invitation to dialogue across difference. This was to dialogue across trauma, across violence, across betrayal. Rival gang members, police officers, people whose children were killed by gang violence, someone whose mother was killed by the same gang violence. They were all invited to sit at this table together. There were so many good reasons, really the best reasons to stay home. So many good data to say, you know what, sit this one out and be safe. So when I asked Tyrone Riley Sr. why he showed up, why he took the risk to come to the table, he said something that I'll never forget. Because I wanted to give my son a future he can dream about. Not just a future he can survive, not just a future that's not worse, a future he can dream about. Think about it. If you don't believe the future will be worse, if you believe the future will be worse than the present, if you're convinced that we're heading towards irreversible decline, then every decision we make, every word we speak, every vision we cast will be contaminated by that fear. Your family will feel it, your organizations will feel it, your communities will internalize it. When leaders are consumed by fear of the future, we unconsciously communicate that fear to everyone around us. We retreat into our ideologies, we hoard resources, we capitulate in the face of bullies, we make decisions from a place of scarcity instead of possibility, and we become risk-averse exactly when bold imagination is needed most. But there's an even deeper problem here. If we can't genuinely envision a future working toward, worth living into, and if we can't feel authentically excited about what's ahead, then we're asking people to follow us into a darkness we ourselves don't believe can be illuminated. It is very hard to lead people into a future you're afraid of. Think about Václav Havel, who we read last year in the Action Forum, in communist Czechoslovakia. The regime wanted dissidents to collapse into despair, to believe the future was fixed, to accept that freedom was impossible. But Havel understood something essential. His role as a humanist and as a leader was not to martyr himself to the predictions, but to live more brightly, to make more joy and more art, even in the face of oppression. Havel wrote plays, he threw parties, he insisted on all of that as a political act. Or think about the abolitionists in the 19th century in America. They lived in a world where slavery was legal, profitable, and defended by both law and scripture. The entire economic system of the South depended on it. Most people, even those who found it distasteful, believed it was simply too entrenched to ever be dismantled. But leaders like Frederick Douglass, who we read in seminar, refused to accept that that future was fixed. He wasn't naive about the darkness they faced. He knew the odds, but he refused to let the fear of the future paralyze the capacity to imagine something better. He didn't just write and fight against slavery, he imagined beyond it. Douglass, in his own words, and I quote, "The thought of only being a creature of the present and the past was troubling. I longed for a future too, with hope in it. The desire to be free awakened my determination to act, to think, and to speak. They planted networks of safe houses. They created underground newspapers. They nurtured the dreams of a country where all children could attend school, where families could not be sold apart, where human dignity was universal, not because that was guaranteed or even likely, but because it was a dream worth living into, a dream worth leading into." Douglass understood that leadership was not to become an expert in the minutiae of the day, but to enable people to imagine a life worth risking everything for. Ecclesiastes. To everything there is a season, and a time to every purpose under heaven. A time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to pluck up that which is planted. We have plucked all we can from this ground we stand on. This is a time for leaders to plant, a time to plant new visions, new coalitions, irresistible futures. Not because our problems aren't real, not because the darkness isn't dark, but because our families, many here this week, our children, our neighbors, our teammates deserve more. They need us to plant futures that they can dream about. If you're in this room, you are a leader, full stop. And we talk a lot about leadership at the Aspen Institute, in our fellowships, in our seminar, and every week, every year here during this week of the Aspen Forum. So before we hear from our good friends and leaders, General Wesley, Ambassador Kamani, and Heather Son, I will end here with Goethe. Whatever you can do or dream you can, begin it. Boldness has genius, power, and magic in it. The world needs our boldness, it needs our genius, it needs our magic, and it needs your imagination. Welcome to the Action Forum.